And good morning and welcome and Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Uh,
Amen.
so I had come across this prayer by Thomas Merton, which in some ways I felt said some feelings that I had about the religious life, and I wanted to take a moment. Lisa had suggested that I share it with the group at this point. I had shared it with a group of daveners just recently, and Lisa thought it might be worth sharing with all of you, so I'm going to do that. Just going to get it up on my screen. One moment. Here it goes. Um, my Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself, and the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does, in fact, please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. And apparently it's from a greater work called Thoughts in Solitude. Um, and I thought it was something worth sharing with all of you.
Thank you.
Well, we'll get into the text here of Torah Tamima, and give me a moment as I kind of get things situated. So we have a little more grammar to deal with today, oh, and at the same time, we have some interesting midrashic interpretations too. So here we are. So what's happened to bring us up to this moment is that uh, Pharaoh's daughter went to bathe in the Nile, and she saw the little box in which baby Moses was there, and she heard him crying. And she opened the box, and she saw uh, and recognized that he was a Hebrew baby. There's Rashi on all of that. That's very interesting that we looked at yesterday. And we also know, of course, that Moses' sister, Miriam, and we know that it's from another place, not from here, was also watching to see what would happen. So here we go. Vatomer achoto el bat paro. His sister said to the daughter of Pharaoh, Ha'elech, so this is the hey of She'elah, and you notice that it has a patach underneath it because of the aleph that follows. It's a guttural letter. Again, some grammar stuff here that Rashi is not going to deal with, but just pointing out it means, shall I go? Shall I go, v'karati lach, and call for you, Isha, a woman, meineket, who is a nurse, who can nurse, min ha'ivriot, from the Hebrews. In other words, should I go and see if I can find a Hebrew nurse to suckle the baby? V'teinik lach et hayelet, so that she can suckle for you the child. Min ha'ivriot, so from the Hebrews. So why dafka? Why would she want that necessarily? Rashi explains, Melamed, this informs us, shehechazirato al mitzriot harbe, that in fact she gave Moses, the baby, to many Egyptian women, leinak, in order to give to nurse, velo yanak, but he wouldn't nurse from them. Lefi shahaya atid ledaber im hashchina, because because later on he was going to speak with the Shekhinah, with the divine presence.
So I guess those verbs are related to tinok.
Yes, they are. So tinok means basically a suckling. That's how you might translate it literally.
Hmm.
Absolutely. So there was a as you can see, I've made some notes here. A Torah Tmima that gets into some halachot that are derived in some ways from this particular verse, and it has to do with nursing and whether or not the issue becomes whether or not it is okay. This is, of course, days before you had baby formula, right? That baby formula is pretty recent, I suspect, of vintage, and certainly commercially made, uh, where you had nursing women who were paid to do that. And the question becomes, is it okay to have a Jewish child nursed by a non-Jewish woman? And it's interesting, actually, what the halacha is, as it turns out to be. When you look at this particular verse. Now, I can summarize for you without actually looking at the Torah Tamima how things work out. There is actually a difference of opinion regarding this, but it is interesting, in fact, what the halacha turns out to be. Do you want to take any guesses, and do you want me to look at the
I have a
actual?
guess.
Yes, go for it. Go for it.
My guess is that you shouldn't do it except for to save a life, like it's your only choice to have the baby thrive.
Very
That's
well.
what I was
Okay.
gonna
Okay.
say.
So it may be worth looking at this. So the truth is that is in fact one of the opinions. That is one of their opinions. But there is
The,
yeah. Go ahead. Yeah,
the
Harley.
other opinion would be, Rabbi, that Miriam got her mother to suckle the baby, and the baby was with her mother for a while until she gave him back to the princes.
Right. So that would
Yes.
say the same thing essentially, right? We're still talking about a Jewish woman nursing the baby. Okay. So
Right.
the answer is this. It's very interesting. So I'll just tell you what the answer is, and then we can go on with the Rashi. The answer is no, that is not the case. It is fine. Why? Because he was going to be speaking with having divine communication. And the implication is that were it not for the fact that he was having divine communication, there would have been no problem whatsoever. That's the basic conclusion, which I think is very cool, by the way. So it
So
is absolutely permissible to have a non-Jewish woman
so the
suckle
assumption
the
is that
child.
all future Jewish babies would not in the future, in their futures, be speaking to the Shekhinah or
Probably not in the way Moses spoke, that's for sure. No one has, and no one will. That's basically what it said, I believe. Certainly it says no one has since, but essentially, remember, no, Moses had a very unique level of divine communication.
yeah.
So it's a, and by and large, of course, we want to go with the majority and with the prevalent. That's the way you have to determine law is not by the exceptions, but by the prevalent behavior and prevalent, situation. And I don't know of anyone these days who has divine communication and claims sanity at the same time. There's another statement that says that since Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, who were the last of the literary prophets, that prophecy was turned over to children. I think I'm trying to think. Yeah, basically, I'm not sure if it's people that are not sane and children. So, but and it's interesting how that's sometimes applied in a serious way. At any rate, so we'll go on. I just thought that was a really interesting conclusion. And so we're looking at diuks. A diuk is when you look at a word that is not necessary and say, well, dafka, because that word is put in, there must be a reason why scripture put it in, because it seems like an unnecessary word. So. So here, of course, this drush is based on the fact that she tells her. She doesn't say karati lach isha meineket, right? Why does she tell her from the Hebrews? And the reason why Miriam, just to help you understand the dynamic of this drush, is why does Miriam say to her, I will find you a nurse from the Hebrews? You know, she could have just said to her, let me find you a nurse, period. So there must have been a reason why she said to her, well, you know, I'll find you somebody from the Hebrews since you haven't been successful up to this point. That's what's driving this drush. So let's go on. Vatomer la bat paro lechi. So the daughter of Pharaoh said to her, go. Vatelecha Alma, and the young woman went. Vatikra et em hayeled, and she called the mother of the child. So Vatelecha Alma, again, what's this word Alma doing here? Why do we need this particular word here? It could have said Vatelech Vatikra et em hayeled. She went and she called the mother of the child. We don't need Alma. So what is Alma coming to tell us here? Vatelecha Alma hacha bezrizut ve'almut ke'elim. She went with alacrity and vigor like a youth. So again, we'd have that just sort of begs a different question, which is, so what is that trying to tell us? And maybe some of you have some ideas, but again, my basic go-to place for this is just that these are all statements like others that we've come across already, just trying to give us a sense of the divine, that this is in fulfillment of the divine will, that this is, and perhaps going beyond that to say that it was all part of God's plan and that God was determined to have this plan come about.
That's
adds that layer to it. Yes.
That confirms what I was thinking, because where I keep encountering the word zrizut, alacrity had to do with the attitude of what you should have when you're doing a mitzvah.
Absolutely.
You're supposed to have,
Right.
carry it out with alacrity, like, and this is not me, but you're supposed to jump out of bed as soon as you realize you're awake to start performing your mitzvot and do everything with alacrity, according to and I think it's Pirkei Avot. Anyway, not Pirkei. What is the one that's just
Shulchan Aruch? You mean the Shulchan Aruch?
No. It's the one that's just about ethics.
That is Pirkei Avot. That is Pirkei Avot. That's the Mishnah that has these.
I thought it was a different. Anyway,
it may be.
Anyway, but it's something we were reading and in a class, and so anyway, I just associate that word with God's will.
Right. So one of the books of halacha, and it could be the Shulchan Aruch, talks about the need that basically it starts off by saying this, that you need to be as as light as a deer and as strong as an ox, etc., to fulfill the will of your Father in heaven. And it explains, what does that mean? It means getting out of bed, because that's what it takes to get out of bed early in the morning.
Yeah, it was some kind of text about Musar.
Right. And it's a show. Okay, it's also an indication of love, by the way. There's that famous, at least for me, it's famous line from when Harry met Sally at the very end, and I've shared this with you all before, I'm pretty sure, where she has had it with him, and she says to him, "Why now, Harry?" And he says, "Because you realize that when you realize and discover the person with whom you want to spend the rest of your life, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible." So these are all indications of love. So it's an indication of how much she loved, how much Miriam loved Moses, how much she cared about him. You could interpret it that way as well, just trying to read between the lines. Onwards.
I think I'd like to add that, she's in that midrash where she actually told her father, "You're worse than Pharaoh," right?
Yes, I know.
She had a vision of the future.
Yes.
For the people, in spite of their terrible situation. And here she saw a little window of opportunity to bring that future
Good
closer.
point. Good point. So you're saying this is consistent with that previous thing. I mean, that's what I'm hearing you say. Right. That's
Yeah,
beautiful. Right. Very nice. By the way, in general, of course, right? There's a statement that says that the reason why the Israelites were redeemed was because of the women. That the reason why God decided to go ahead and redeem them had to do with the women. And
right.
here
And Miriam's
and here
the
we
only,
and here we seeing, excuse me, just let me finish. And here we are seeing such evidence of that, right? We've got first of all Yocheved, and then we've got Miriam, right? We've got and also the daughter of Pharaoh. Let's not leave her out, right? All these women involved.
I just was going to say Miriam's the one that we get the best spotlight on, I think.
Right. But we shouldn't and of course there's also Tzipporah, by the way, who saves Moses' life later on.
Do we know how old Miriam is approximately at this point in
I
time?
don't, I mean, she's older than Moses clearly, but
Well, yeah.
maybe I would say, less than 20. She could be 12 years old.
Okay.
She could be, I mean, that's where I'd put her
She the firstborn,
approximately.
or is
That's a
it
good question.
Aaron?
I think
Just
Aaron is. I
okay.
think Aaron is, but I don't say that with certainty. Please
Okay.
understand. She is
Just
the first
yeah,
to pass on. She is the first to die. She
yeah.
dies before Aaron, and then Aaron, and then
Right.
Moses.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
maybe she is the firstborn. I don't know. Yeah.
Mm.
Uh, let's go
Doesn't
on. Yeah, go ahead.
Alma
Alma?
imply that she's been married? Oh, it's Alma.
Yes.
That's
Almana, interestingly, the relationship of those two words, Almana is a widow,
right.
but an Alma, the masculine being Elaim, is a youth, a
Okay.
a young person.
Okay.
Or Elim, sorry. Elaim actually is spelled differently. It's a different word, which means blind, but this is Elim and Alma. Let's see. Right. So just if I'm repeating this, forgive me. But Vatomer la bat Paro, Heilihi, and the daughter of Pharaoh said to her, take et hayeled, take the child, hazeh, take this child, v'heinikihu li, and have him nursed for me, va'ani eten etzcharech, and I will pay you, right? I will pay you wages. I will give you wages. Vatikach ha'isha hayeled vatanikehu, and the woman took. Now it says the woman, right? So this could refer to Yocheved now. The woman took the child and nursed it. Let me see. Okay, let's take a look at it. This is lovely. Lovely midrash here. Very short Rashi, but just lovely. Heilihi, right, means take. Nit nab'ah, this is referring to Pharaoh's daughter. This is the words from her mouth, right? She prophesied. Velo yada ma shenit nab'ah. She prophesied without knowing what she was prophesying. Because she says Heilihi, and in Aramaic it's He Shelichi, right? Here, hey, this one, Shelichi is yours. In other words, she said to Yocheved, here is yours. But she didn't know that. When she used the words Heilichi, right, she didn't realize that she was in Aramaic saying the equivalent of here's your child. Okay, that's the prophecy that Yocheved, after all, was Moses' mother. So just there was a sort of I love the play on words there from Aramaic to Hebrew. I'm trying to think if there's another. Oh yes, so when I was years ago, I remember sort of hearing how they made a deal out of the fact that Moses' mother was paid to nurse him. And I've sort of tried to think in myself, what is the significance of that? Right? I mean, that's significant in that the Torah says to us this little detail about the daughter of Pharaoh paying Yocheved to nurse her own child, right? So I don't know if any of you have there any thoughts that occur to you in what might be significant about that, other than the irony of it. I mean, clearly it's an ironic statement, but there must be more. I
I
feel
have
like there
some
has to be
ideas,
more. Okay, go for it, please.
of course. But so we've been all along portraying Pharaoh's daughter as who has some connection to Jews and Judaism and the Jewish people and God, and this is her part of her contribution. She wants to be a part of it,
Yes.
and her paying for it makes her a part of it. The other thought I had is that paying somebody is benefiting them, and as someone who's in this kind of downward state of being a Jew in Egypt, that's helpful. But also, Moses is going to benefit everybody in general, not just the Jews, but the whole thing about the Jewish people, and then later, whatever happens in some kind of messianic age, that's all benefit.
Hmm.
And so this is just, kind of a little shadow of that.
Right. Right.
I got something. It's also a reminder to Yocheved that this child is not really hers anymore, that
Mm.
she is taking care of someone else's child, and the money should benefit the child. Like in a divorce, settlement, same idea, that the money should go towards the welfare of the child and taking care of the child, clothing, things like that.
Except for the child's not supposed to be anyone's, he's supposed to be dead.
Well, that's of course according to
True.
Pharaoh, right? And winds
Yeah.
up, of course, there's also that irony, right? Look at this in terms of literary irony, right? How literary this story is. That here is a child who supposedly was supposed to be killed and winds up actually growing up in Pharaoh's court as the son, the adopted son of his daughter, right? I mean,
Right.
there's all this irony, thrown into all of this, and how, of course, in the end, he is the one who rescues the Israelites from servitude. Yeah, I think what you were bringing out, Lauren, for me also was the fact that here she was paying, right? And the Israelites essentially were slaves. They were doing this for nothing. And there is an issue later on, and I'm not sure if Rashi will bring this out, and we may even cover it, how there is I think actually, excuse me, I think this might have been in a Torah Tamima about the spoils of Egypt actually being their payment for this, that paying a person to do work is a very legitimate and honorable thing to do. And how honorable Pharaoh's daughter was, because technically, I mean, if we want to scratch around on this, since this is a Hebrew, she knows they're Hebrews, since in fact they are slaves to Pharaoh, there was no reason that she had to pay Yocheved, and here she is paying. She isn't. She is not treating Yocheved as a slave. So I think there's a lot being to unpack there in terms of, first of all, just how great a person she was, the fact that she's in fact in some ways, of course, subverting what her father's doing. That in a sense, she's where it's starting here in subverting what Pharaoh was trying to do to the Israelites. And also, I think, this is sort of a theme that I like, which is to show the righteous of other nations and not just be, jingoistic about Jews and Israelites, but to say that the Torah itself is speaking well of other people and not just about Israelites.
Well, I
Yeah,
have something to say that,
yes,
um, in those communities, people talk, and the women especially, they're close to each other. And maybe there was a bond of akin to friendship with some of the women and some of the people, the Egyptians and the Israel
Hmm.
Israelites.
Hmm.
So maybe the women knew, and maybe they, had orchestrated this happening after, they heard that, the baby was put in, Moses was put in the river,
Hmm.
he was rescued, and then the word got around. So maybe there was compassion and love that was going around in different circles,
Hmm.
because they were all, living there together, even though they were separate. But you know how people talk.
Hmm. Hmm.
So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, no, no. It is an unusual thing, and it certainly might be the subject. Well, could be the subject of conversation. So on a slightly different note, so remember all the trouble there was in Northern Ireland and Ireland. I mean, for years and years and decades, right? And the violence and all this, and it appears to have come to an end. Am I correct? I believe it has. And how did it come to an end? I don't actually remember reading anything about. Not that I'm a news hound, but I don't remember exactly how this all got resolved. And for some reason, I feel that there were women involved who finally brought this to an end, that the women were sick and tired of this and somehow, stopped this from, continuing. Do any of you know? Can you shed some light on that? I'm curious. You don't hear about Northern Ireland anymore. Do any of you know? How did that come to an end?
I'm
I think Lauren's looking it up.
looking
I
it
asked
up.
my
Yeah.
husband, but he's still sleeping.
Okay. Yeah, but you understand what I'm saying because it was in the news quite regularly, the violence that was going on and this stuff. I mean, it was really decades and decades. So, all right. And of course, I'm trying to think of the Greek play where I'm trying to think. It's on the tip of my tongue. But there's a Greek play where the women are sick and tired of their men going to war and refuse to cohabit with their husbands. Oh gosh, it's like right there on the tip
I
of my
remember
tongue.
that play. I can't,
Yes. What's
I
it?
think it's
Yeah.
like
Oh,
the plural of a word, but I can't think
yeah.
of what it is right now.
It's the woman's name, I believe, who decides on that particular thing. And of course, they bring all the warfare to an end. All right, I'll
So, I
take.
mean, just a quick glance of
Yes.
Wikipedia.
Husband says Lysistrata.
Yes,
Lysa
Lysistrata.
Strata, right,
That is
right,
it. It is
right.
Oh,
Strata. Right, exactly. Yes. Go on.
And I'm just saying that I'm just looked up Wikipedia as a
Yes.
starting point. It does not mention women. You'd have to like really get more deeply into following all the links and reading more about it.
Okay. Okay. But something happened to change that, clearly. We'll take one more verse. Vayigdal Hayeled, the child grew up, Yigdal, grew large, literally. Vataviehu levat paro, and she brought him, so it must be his mother, right? Brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh. Vayhila levin, and he was to her as a son. She became his son to the daughter of Pharaoh. Wow. Right? Vatikra Shmo Moshe. She gave him the name Moshe. Vatomer, and she said, or she thought, right? Ki min hamayim mishitihu, because from the water I drew him. I drew him. Again, I think there is symbolism involved in being drawn from the water. I wonder if this might even go back from a literary point of view back to Noah and the idea of saving humanity, saving people. Lauren, when you were talking about, what Moses would bring to the world is the fact that he was the instrument by which Torah became manifest to humankind. So just something to that effect. Let's stop here. And I'm going to
And
pop in a
and
bookmark.
water is sometimes symbolizes Torah, right?
Yes, it does. You're right about that. For me, it symbolizes also judgment, judgment, an instrument of judgment. That's why we had water regarding uh, the flood being the world being judged through water, water being an instrument of judgment because it can be both a huge blessing to the point of view that to the point that if we don't have water, we can't survive, and on the other hand, it can be a source of death, as in flooding, and likewise in judgment, we have to have it. So with that, I am going to stop the share and bring the recording to an end, and thank you all for participating.